I guess I'll do a little bit of an intro here because, for whoever's watching this later. Hi, this is Mrs. Cole, and I teach at Lafayette High School in Walker County. It is a very rural school district, and we have a lot of, students who we have big FFA group, and financially challenged area. We definitely struggle. But it's been very rewarding. This is, I think, either my 17th or 18th year of teaching. I'm an English teacher, not a math teacher, so I lose track. And it's the only school I've ever taught at, like, full time. This is where I started all the way back in 2005, and I've been there ever since. And it's really meaningful. It's really, really meaningful. I enjoy what I do. I care about making a difference to my students, and it's just it's a really special place. I really like it. So I thought back over my experiences and thought about, how I would structure things for new teachers. And Dr. Myers, this just occurred to me. I think I also sent you my original philosophy of education statement. And then the second page is the one that I did when, last year. So I think I may have sent you that as a PDF earlier. So you may want to share that, because I understand that you guys were recently working on your philosophy of ed statements as well. So you can kind of see how some of that's changed. So it was fun to look back on that and to work on it again. So as I was going through, I actually went to some blog posts and I was like, okay, tips for new teachers. Where do I start with this? And what I noticed was they didn't feel very helpful to me, because they went over things like, the number one thing is to establish a good relationship with your students. It's so important to make those connections and, and have a strong relationship. If they, what was the phrase? They won't care what you know until they know that you care. I'm like, okay, that's great. How do you do that? So they were really not specific. So in what I'm going to share with you now and what's in the PDF, I tried to be more specific. So my first suggestion, something that you can actually get started on now, even before you go into your practicum, is build and maintain your support network. I'm not talking about your professional support network. I'm talking about the people who are there for you no matter what. For me, starting out, it was my husband and my parents. Who are you going to call when you are expected to sign in by 7:30 and you're sitting in the parking lot at 7:20 and you can't stop crying and you don't know if you can do it? Not just today, but you're thinking about calling in and quitting when you call in to not come in that day. Who do you call who will pick up the phone and will just listen and will support you no matter what you decide to do? Those are you need some of those people, ideally multiple. Who is somebody that you can call when you know you're going to go home and you're going to face plant on the couch and you won't be able to fix anything to eat? You need to eat, very important. But those sorts of people, they may be related to you legally or genetically, or they may be chosen family. I mean, those are the sorts of people who are your family, whatever the relationship is. That's what that is. And then obviously, as you continue throughout your career, it's important to maintain those relationships, because hopefully if they're there for you, you're going to be able to be there for them as well. The second thing that I really want to encourage you to do, and this is really tough, especially as a new teacher, is to work your contract. Read your contract. Know exactly what it says is required of you and how you'll be compensated. And that's what you work. As a new teacher, you're coming in, you don't have the automaticity that builds up, the fluency that you build up with years and years of experience. You also don't have the enormous store of materials that, nope, you don't see that back there, but the books and books and books and books and books, and the familiarity with, this is the book that I need right now to go into more detail, those sorts of things. you'll pick some of that up. But when you're coming in, now, fortunately, you have some support in the form of your teacher prep program, but experience is really going to help you on that. You'll learn what works for you, how you're going to tweak things and do things differently, but just be aware that you're going to need to prioritize vigilantly. I've got it right here. This is my note, okay, to myself. Number 1, know myself and my values. Number 2, set goals that align with my values. Prioritize tasks in order to reach those goals, and protect my priorities, and examine any threats to them very carefully. So my priorities are not necessarily going to be the same as the priorities that other people have for me, but I need to be aware of the consequences of not meeting their expectations. Sometimes you're going to have to let people down. You need to be aware of what the consequences for that are. You're going to have to decide what is most important and what is important but less important, so that you know if you have to let go of something, what do you have to hold on to and what do you need to let go of first. Letting go of something that is important is going to be really difficult. It's going to hurt. But that allows you to do a good job on what you value. I have a couple of different kind of catchphrases that I use. One is probably my go-to one is, I don't want to commit to something that I'm not confident I can follow through on. So I'm going to pass on this. Thank you for thinking of me. It's really hard. But it's the truth. I don't want to promise something that I can't deliver. No. So prioritizing is super, super important. Think of the work that you need to do. For me, generally, top priority is planning. If you have a bunch of students and you don't have anything for them to do, it's really going to suck. So planning is a top priority for me. Work that needs to be done, that you will either go nuts or lose your job on, that's got to be, try to finish that during your workday. Avoid as much as possible doing any have to do stuff on evenings or weekends. Now, things like surfing Pinterest to get ideas for what sort of theme you want to have for your classroom, talking with other teachers, joining a Facebook group or a tweet chat or anything like that. All of those sorts of things, that's like the hobby part of teaching. And so it's not going to feel like a burden. It shouldn't feel like a burden. And if it does, you can let go of it because it's not something you need to do. So, I do that as much as I will stress, work your contract. I do stuff like that because I'm just like, yay, teaching. And the fact that I work my contract allows me to enjoy those hobby teaching type things because I'm not, even into almost 20 years, I'm not burnt out. I'm still very excited and I look forward to teaching. This semester is challenging for me because I'm doing online facilitation of classes and I'm not actually getting to provide instruction. And it's really hard for me. And I'm really looking forward to next semester when I get to teach again. Keep your personal devices personal. Avoid sending work emails or making calls outside of contract hours. There will be times when you need to call caregivers. I highly recommend doing that from school. If you don't get them, leave a message. They can call the school back, leave a message. You may have to play phone tag, but that can be really important. It's important to have these boundaries. And also another thing, anything that you do schoolwork on can be subpoenaed, like the whole thing. So just that's a way of maintaining that personal space. Additionally, if I have access to my school email, I'm going to check it. I hate half knowing something and be like, yes, but has anybody said anything about this? If it's not there, like during the week, I don't bring my school laptop home and I don't have school email on my phone. So if something comes up, I just have to get it in the morning. And that's not an unreasonable expectation. It helps me. It makes me maintain those boundaries. So sort of for all of this, boundary type concept, that the analogy that I like to use is if you're on a plane and the flight attendant is giving the safety talk, they'll say that if we encounter some turbulence and the oxygen masks drop down, put on your own oxygen mask first. And they have to tell you this because it's counterintuitive. If you're sitting next to a 6 or 7-year-old, if the turbulence is bad enough, the oxygen masks drop, you've probably been in turbulence for a little while. And that kid is scared and they're probably crying and those oxygen masks drop. And your first instinct is going to be to help the kid. You can't effectively help others if you're not healthy. So it's really important to maintain those boundaries. Along those lines, if not all systems allow this, but if you can use sick days for doctor's appointments, space them out. Take the full day, even if you can get like an 8 a.m. appointment and you know you'll be out of there by 9:30, take the day. Take the day. Essentially, that allows you to build in some rest. So that's actually why I'm able to be here. I had a doctor's appointment late this morning, and I took the day. I knew this was not a scheduled one. This was a follow-up because I was sick. But I usually have my general practitioner annual checkup in the spring, and then I have 6-month dentist appointments. I'll have one in the fall and one in the spring, based on we have more spread out days off in the fall, and I usually need more of a break in the spring. So it really helps because and some of it also is I've been teaching for a long time, so I think my immune system has kind of been boosted. But I very rarely take days where I've been sick overnight and I have to call in and like throw something together. Another nice thing about using sick days for doctor's appointments is I can plan for it in advance, know what my students are going to do, have good subplans, and know that even if I have other teachers that are covering the class, I've prepped my students. They know what they're supposed to do. I'm not throwing something together at the last minute. It makes it easier on me too. So I really recommend that. So some additional sort of thinking into the school year. Your first responsibility is not teaching. It's not. Your first responsibility is student safety. Student safety is first. First. If students are not safe, they cannot learn. So make sure you sign in however your school has you do it. Do that right away. Develop a habit of taking attendance right away. Just right away. On my school laptop, just along the top border, I've got like a piece of masking tape that I've written on take attendance ASAP. Because like when I look at my computer, I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to do that. I have to remind myself because it's so easy to forget. Like I said, I like teaching. I will just go right in, and get started. And then like half the period's gone and we have a fire drill and I realize I didn't take attendance. And that's bad. You need to know where your students are at all times. It's so important. Along those lines, be aware of what your school expects as far as like students going to the restroom or otherwise being out of the room. Hall passes, do you get everybody all go at the same time? How does that work? If you've got like the really, really little ones, sometimes you'll have like an in the room restroom. So it just depends, but know what your school expects of you. And just, I don't know, I'm hoping you guys are familiar with Abbott Elementary, but I know college can be really challenging and, maybe you're not interested in it, or maybe you've just been swamped and haven't had a chance. But one of the things that really gets under my skin is when they leave their students to ask another teacher to watch their students. I'm just like, don't leave the room. Just please don't leave the room. And again, be aware of how you're like, if something happens, like if you feel a little rumbly in your tummy and you're like, I got to go. How does your school expect you to deal with that? And it's going to be different for different schools, and it may change. Like we used to have classroom phones, and we could call if you know who's on planning, be like, hey, can you come watch my students for just like 5 minutes? I got to go to the bathroom. But we don't have those. So now we have wall buttons that will page the office. And if something comes up, we'll need to page the office and wait for somebody to come. So that can be a real challenge. All right. Okay, so my next set is management tips. But before I do that, I'm going to pause. I feel like I just dumped a whole lot on you. And I get really excited when I'm talking about teaching. So I feel like I'm talking kind of fast. But I figured I'd pause here and open it up. What are some of the things? Is any of this things that you've already heard from your classes?
So I'm not an education major, but my mom's a teacher,
Okay,
so this is pretty similar to like what she would say. So
awesome, awesome. Oh, so just out of curiosity, what is your major?
it's integrated studies. I want to be a librarian, and I was a STEM major before, so that integrated studies gets me graduated into to grad school faster.
Okay,
So
cool. Well, good luck with that. I
yeah.
am very much one of the videos that I've got on my channel is a big squee for libraries, and I think the first interview that I did was with a library worker here, and we talked about since I'm in Georgia, some of the recent political discussions about what books should or shouldn't be in libraries and or in public schools as well. So we talked about that and how libraries choose their books and what their procedures are and things like that. So um, definitely an interesting time to be pursuing library science. So good luck with that. All right, if you have other questions, I can see things as they pop up in the chat. I'm going to go ahead to the management tips section. If something comes up, if something doesn't make sense, or if you just have more that you want, or things that you want to ask questions about, pop them in the chat. I'll see that pop up, and I can address those. So my management strategy is basically constant vigilance. It's exhausting. It really is. But being aware of sort of the vibe of the room and sort of where everyone's at all times is a skill that you will pick up on, that you will improve with practice. So be aware of issues, off task type behaviors, things that indicate that somebody is drifting away, and redirect those issues before they escalate into problems. You've probably heard something, just answer in chat. Have you heard about using positive language instead of negative language? Like, do this, not don't do that. I find that it's easier to get a student to do what you want them to do if you tell them what that is. If they've got, if they're leaning back and they've got their feet up on the desk, rather than saying, don't put your feet on the desk, ask them, put your feet on the floor, please. And it's clearer. Felicity, one of the things you say, you're going to call when it's 7 a.m. You're crying in the parking lot, having to be there at 7:30. It does decrease. The potential is there throughout your career. Things change. As Dr. Myers told you earlier on, I've had some very challenging experiences with administration. So, I've thought about what I want to do and why I want to be there. And one of the reasons that I haven't gone to look somewhere else is that when I was hired, I clicked really well with that administration. And that principal left, and we've gone through several others. Some I've clicked with more than others, obviously. So if you're in a bad situation, think about what is leading you into those feelings, into that situation, and whether or not you can outlast it. Because moving schools is work on its own. And the process just of teaching, as you get better at it, it becomes less daunting. And so the reasons why I cried at the beginning was I wasn't doing as well as I wanted to do. I wasn't doing as good of a job as I wanted to do. I don't have that anymore. That's not an issue.
Yeah, if I could just interject really quickly, like the reason that I cried today is because I have a student in crisis and I was worried about him. and I was able to take a deep breath, talk to my support network, right? Find him resources, and it changes because you get more resources.
Yeah.
When you first start out, it feels like you're lacking a lot, and then you develop it. So I just wanted to, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not the same. We're always able to help. It just, we tend to help so much. This is a helping profession that it takes its toll, and we should be paid more.
Yeah. And so actually, Zebby, I have a paper that I have on secondary trauma and some of the strategies that I use to help with that. Because yes, if you stick with it and you get past and you get out of the, okay, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And you can sort of step back, and some of that becomes, you get more flow from that. You start understanding your students more, and that's its own challenge. One of the things that I feel pulled both ways on is that when you care a lot, the more you care, the more you're going to get hurt. And so sometimes it feels like it's not worth it. But when I get some emotional distance from the hurt, I can think about it and be like, yeah, I know it's worth it. I know I can get through the hurt and do the best that I can and offer what I can. And I can be okay with that. Maybe not right in the moment, but I mean, I literally can think back. I remember the first student I had that they didn't come back, and I found that they had dropped out. Cheryl, thanks for letting us know. Just be safe. So yeah, there's always, and there are good tiers too. Keep the notes that students give you that say, thank you so much for believing in me. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I learned things that I never thought I could. Keep those suckers. And yes, they will absolutely make you cry. Felicity, at this point, like I said, because the way I prioritize, and again, this semester, I try not to rely on this, because I have very little planning to do, because I don't get to do any of the instructions. So it really changes my schedule around. But even last year and the year before, I don't bring work home. I just don't. And so I've also gotten to the point that I have an idea about how long my turnaround time is going to take for grading and things like that. That's why I'm encouraging you to work your contract as beginning teachers, because if you develop these habits early on, they're going to be easier. It's going to be easier to maintain them going forward than it is if you're burning the candle at both ends. If that becomes a habit, it's really hard to make changes once you're used to doing things that way. So what I would say is, as you're getting started with school, a big thing, especially for those of you who are elementary students, and I'm secondary, so I might be off base on this. Plan first. Decorating your room. I know that it's super important to have a welcoming room in elementary, but more of that is about you. So much more of that is about you than about what your room looks like. It really is. Additionally, if you put up a bulletin board border around a big old blank space of wall, and then just put in the words "our work" and a big smiley face, super easy to do. And it shows this is going to be where your stuff goes. So it allows students to take ownership of that. It's, so establishing those boundaries is important, but be aware, and sort of for your first year, especially, you're going to have a lot more energy than you will later on. And you're going to have a lot more just that nervous excitement and energy from that. So go ahead and use that. So I don't stay an hour after school. You may even want to say an hour and a half every day, because you're just that excited about what you're doing. But, again, in that time, you should also be prioritizing, because you're using that as your have to do work time. So again, planning so that you know how you're moving through your curriculum and how they're learning. I would strongly encourage that to be your first. My secondary priority is giving students feedback on their work. And then probably from that, depending on that, it's caregiver contacts. Another phrase that I sometimes use when I feel like a lot of stuff's being put on me is, to ask the person who is making this request, how high of a priority is this? And what do you want? What do you expect me to deprioritize so that I can focus on this? So having a good idea of how overestimate how long things take as well. Give yourself some leeway. If you are grading essays and the first one takes you 10 minutes to grade, I guarantee you that the 30th is going to take at least 20. You need to put in some breaks. Otherwise, your brain is going to go, I can't, you're going to start going cross-eyed and you won't be able to look at it. So you need to have some time away from it. Bristol says, one time one of my professors told me that after your first year of teaching, that it's not uncommon for teachers to receive a pink slip. The phrase at my school that we call that is being non-renewed, because we have year-to-year contracts. And Georgia does not exactly have due process, but if you've had good evaluations and then you're abruptly non-renewed, even though Georgia does not have an official union, you can get legal representation if you feel you've been unfairly terminated. So there are options. But the other thing I'll tell you is you are in a good position. Schools need teachers. And so if you get non-renewed after your first year, you count it a blessing. You don't want to work there. You deserve better than a school that does not want you. And you can get it. I guarantee you that for the next 5 years, you will be able to find a job at a school that wants you, and you deserve that. You deserve to be valued. So, and again, so this is also a good time to establish boundaries, because they might give you some, your administration might give you some pushback, but that you are in less of a precarious position than you would be, I would say 10 years ago. One of the things, if you are not familiar with schedule send for email, we can talk about that at the end. It's super helpful. So management steps, we talked about redirecting issues. So as I'm going over, again, redirecting, another strategy that I use is, rather than telling the student what to do, is asking questions. So if I see a student who's just sort of drifting and they do not seem to be engaging with whatever their work is, I might walk over to that student, because proximity is super helpful for, really engaging, and say, what are you working on? And they might say, well, I don't know what to do. Or generally speaking, if I approach in a non-confrontational matter like that, they know they're supposed to be doing something because it's school. And I usually don't get a lot of pushback because I'm not approaching in a confrontational manner. So depending on what, if they don't say, oh, sorry, I just got distracted, and go back to where they were. If they say, well, I don't know what to do, my pickup question for that is, what step is next? So that, tell me where you're at. And if you know where you're at, we can look at what you need to do next. So a lot of teaching is about taking something complex and complicated and breaking it down into manageable pieces. So if they look at what piece they're on, and you can say, okay, what do you think you should do next? Knowing where, think about what we're trying to accomplish. What do you think the next step is? And again, really engage them in a conversation. Okay. This has to be brief, because you got a bunch of other minions out there, bouncing off the walls and saying, banana. Hopefully not. But so you can't spend all your time on one student or one small group. So it's challenging. But proximity and starting with grace, not being a pushover, but, inviting a conversation rather than, being as punitive. And in the times when you look around and everybody's doing what they need to do, and you don't have any behaviors that you need to redirect, point out positive behavior, especially from somebody who maybe doesn't hear it all that much. So-and-so, I really like what I'm seeing in the way that you're just writing away, and you got your eyes, you got your focus face on. I can't wait to see what ideas you share with me on that assignment. I am so looking forward to seeing your work. Those sorts of things. And then just keep aware of the situation. Remember that all students want to be successful. I mean, everybody does. People want to be successful. It's nobody comes in and is like, you know what? I just want to suck. No. But it's also important to remember, especially at the high school level, success is not going to look the same for every student. It's one of the reasons I love teaching sophomores. They're like 15. So they're not freshmen anymore. So it's not like, oh, high school, what's high school like? And, kind of vibrating. And they're not, they're not seniors who are just like, after school, I'm going to do this. And they're focused on becoming an adult. A lot of them are getting their first jobs. They are studying for their driver's test. Like, they are just on this cusp of almost adulthood. And they're starting to question. They're like, well, I always wanted to be a vet because I love animals, but is that just because we've had lots of pets? What else is there? Is that really what I want to do? And they're really some of them are really pushing back on the expectations that have been placed on them, but others are just sort of starting to blink and look around at all the opportunities that are out there. And so they're still they've started re-exploring what success looks like. And those can be some difficult conversations, because how do they tell somebody who cares for them and who has provided for them that they don't want the same things? Sometimes it's, I hate you, you are ruining my life, and, all those teenager things, but most often it's more subtle than that. So especially as an ELA teacher, I get to work with communication, and I can help them develop the communication skills that they need to navigate those conversations a little more successfully. So when I'm talking with, someone else about a student, whether it's administrators or parents or other caregivers or other teachers, I always try to frame it as, we want ultimately the same thing. The parent may want their kid to get an A. I may want their kid to repeat the class because I don't think they're ready for the next level of English. But ultimately, we want the same thing, which is we want that student to be successful. And if I can keep that in my mind, and that helps me to have the other people in the conversation have that framework as well. Something else that you've probably heard about is the use of wait time as an instructional strategy. When you ask a question, you're not supposed to expect them to have an answer right away, because that's just not reasonable. So you wait and you let them think about it. Something that I've noticed, and again, I'm a secondary teacher. Secondary students are very aware of what your timeline is. They know when that bell is going to ring, and they know that you can't keep them for the entire next class period because you likely have other students coming in. So they can outlast you. After a certain point, it's not that they're thinking about the question, they're just waiting for you to move on. So it's important at the same time, you don't want to just say, okay, nobody answered, here's the answer. So again, that goes against it. But if you don't get any new responses, you're probably also told, don't cold call. Don't call on students abruptly by name. I disagree with this. I think it can be a very effective strategy if you do it correctly. The key is to reduce risk, which is what creates a problem with cold calling. You put a student on the spot and they become defensive immediately. Nobody wants to look stupid. Nobody wants to be embarrassed. Not good. So if you reduce the risk, it makes it that much easier. So it should never, ever be a gotcha. Don't call on a student Don't call on students randomly to make them feel like they have to pay attention so that if they're called on, they don't embarrass themselves. That's going to backfire. What happens is they get anxious and they just clam up. Instead, when you call on a student by name, not randomly, but deliberately, start small, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. Closed-ended questions that have clear, easy answers, especially yes or no. Sometimes I like to use something such as, okay, Josh, can you tell me who the protagonist is in this story? And quite often, the students will respond by naming a character. And so I'll backtrack and I'll say, no, you're getting ahead of me. All I did was ask you, can you tell me who the protagonist is? So apparently the answer to that one is yes. But you just jumped right on ahead in there. And so you already told me which character you think is the protagonist. And if Josh doesn't say anything, instead, I can say, it's just a yes or no question. Do you think you can tell me who it is? And if Josh says no, I can say, that's great. That's correct. Thank you so much for participating. And I validate just the fact that he engaged with me. And then if I can go based on that, I can ask maybe it's that he didn't read the story or he doesn't know what a protagonist is. I can say, okay, so based on that, let's go a little bit earlier. Can you name one of the characters in the story? We'll go from there. And maybe, if Josh is really feeling anxious and doesn't want to respond, and I'm paying attention and I can sense that, what I'll say is, all right, Josh, you get to pick now who I'm going to, who you want to have help you out. So Josh picks somebody else in the class to say, okay, so do you know what a protagonist is? And if not, then I can go back over that. Because if two students don't know, then maybe I need to review that. So things like that. And then following up on that, once you actually have something to work with, by asking for or offering, if students are struggling, offering details. If Josh mentions Millicent, I can say, okay, whether or not I think that's the correct answer, my next follow-up question is, what are some of the things that made you pick that name instead of one of the others? So follow up by asking for details, sort of not quite reasoning yet, but evidence. And then reasoning comes after that, where you're looking for open-ended questions. So Josh says the reason he picked Millicent is because her name's in the story more than anybody else. I'm like, okay, so why? Let's make a connection there. Why do we think there's a connection between frequency of a name and that name being the protagonist? So that, kind of gets us thinking about how this example fulfills the definition. And then in the PDF, I have a link to a video that talks about the use of round robin reading, which again is a practice that's tends to be discouraged. The way I do it tends to get a very positive reception from my sophomore students, because I use it as a way to not just reduce risk in my classroom, but by the time they're high school students, there's often a sense of, if I get called on, I better have the right answer or I'm in trouble. And so I want to push back on that and reduce the risk and get students comfortable with things not always going well. In a broader sense, on connecting with your students, show and tell your students that you love them. Just use the L word. It's going to feel a little bit weird. It still does with me, especially like when it's students that I don't know. But love isn't just a feeling, it's an action. By being there for my students, by working my butt off, yes, I am loving my students. By wanting them to be healthy and happy, that is love for them. And so by using that word, it becomes more comfortable. Right now, we hear a lot about toxic positivity, and I want to encourage you to look for what is positive. I do a live stream every other Saturday. I think I have one this Saturday, in which I talk about good things that have happened in my life and, around the nation and the world. And I started it not just to share it with the world, because I don't have that many viewers, but as a way to give myself kind of like a deadline, like a goal of finding 6 positive things. And so because I'm looking for those things, often I come up with more than 6. Whereas if I wasn't deliberately looking for them, I would miss them. We see more of something when we're actually looking for it. At the same time, you have to balance that with authenticity. So like, don't fake a smile, but look for, if you're just not feeling like smiling, rather than, having that sort of cheek aching, feeling, look inside you and around you for a reason to smile, and let that build your smile. If you can't, if you've tried to sort of find something smile worthy and you can't get out of where you're at, be honest about having a rough time. And you don't necessarily have to give details, but that honesty will be that'll be respected, because you're showing respect by saying, I'm going to be honest with you. You're extending it. Some other just general tips. Your first year teaching, you will not be the best teacher that you can be. And that's going to be so hard. It is hard. You're going to feel like you can't keep up, like you're not doing a good enough job, and just you're barely trying to keep your head up, out of the water. You're going to feel like you're drowning. Some days are going to be better than others. I will say, my mentor teacher said, it's going to be okay. You are doing a good job. Next year will be better. That's sort of. I had more skill my next year, but that made it feel harder for me because I was more aware of everything that was going wrong as it happened. Whereas like my first year, it was like everything went wrong that class period. I don't know what to do. The second year was like, everything is going wrong right now. And I like right now. And if I knew what to do, I could stop it. And that was absolutely miserable. I knew enough to recognize that things aren't going well now, and I couldn't fix it all the time. Sometimes we're better than others. My third year was when I felt like I was improving. And that was nice. But I remember going back to my mentor teacher again and saying, but it's hard. And she's like, I know, it'll get better. I said, you said that last year, and you said that the year before. When does it actually get better? She laughed, and she was at 10 years of teaching then. She said, I don't know. I finally felt truly confident in my teaching and my ability by about year 12. So by that point, I was like, I got this. Even if it doesn't go well, I'll be able to find out. I'll be able to understand why it's not going well. I'll be able to make something work, and we'll be able to move forward. So it takes a long time to feel like I know what I'm doing, but it does get better year to year. On boundaries, I hate the words "do your best." They're so vague. Yeah, I don't know. Same for students. I try to avoid telling students to do their best. If anything, I'll say, do what you can and be kind to yourself and have a good time. Even the phrase "do enough." The thing is, there will always be more that you could have done, and it's never going to be enough. If you get caught up in that, again, you can lose track of your boundaries. And along those same lines, your feelings are always valid. Your feelings are valid. It's also important to remember, though, that feelings are not facts. So like when my mentor teacher told me that she believed that I was doing a good job, she had come in and observed me. She told me the things that I was doing well. It did not feel like I was doing well. But I trusted her, and I trusted her professionalism. I trusted her judgment, and I allowed that to help me move forward. So there I've got another break in it. So I'll pause again, and then I just have a few final closing thoughts, I think. questions? Things that you want me to expand more on. Is there anything that I talked about too much? Just take it out of my notes for next time. Okay, I'll go to the last little bit and then we'll finish up with Q&A and see if Dr. Myers has anything she wants to correct me on or push back on, or we can also talk about the different, because I mean, we've talked a lot regularly about the differences between teaching high school and teaching at the university level. And of course, some of you are going to be teaching at middle school or elementary school level, or even like pre-K. So I'd love to hear about your experiences, especially if you've done any volunteering or like part-time work, or you've previously worked in those areas. How are some of the different structures? Resist the temptation to purchase anything for your classroom. Just hold back. First, check what your school provides. And that means what they've already got. Like, somebody was teaching. So there's stuff there, I guarantee you. It's probably like the worst, and it's probably old and dated. And one of the first things you're going to need to do is go through that, weed out the stuff that you don't actually want to use, that is so out of date that the material is wrong. Like, it still talks about the atom and it has the rings around it for the electron levels, instead of talking about, the cloud or whatever we're on now. Or it talks about, in science, it talks about the two kingdoms, like animals and plants. And that's it. Nope, we're way past that. So check what the school has, and also find out what your school will be able to provide for you if you ask for it. After that, I would highly suggest creating a teacher wish list on Amazon. It's probably a little bit easier to do than a Donors Choose project. I do have a video already up about how to promote your teacher wish list, and it's super helpful to decide what you want to put on your teacher wish list. The best thing to do is just go through like social media and look for other teachers' wish lists and be like, oh, no, I won't really use that. I won't really use that. I want that. So I still do that now, to look at other teachers' ideas for what they want to do with their classes. You'll do that with curriculum too. Look at ideas, be like, I want that, but not quite. And I am going to talk about that for the 5-day feedback. That was something that I saw, and that was something I saw online, and I adapted it for my class. Make sure that you connect with support staff, paraprofessionals, custodial, clerical, and cafeteria staff. They are the ones running the school. And they do important work. I hope that you already have sort of, obviously, they matter, they matter as much as anybody does, because they're part of the school. But yeah, don't take them for granted, and certainly don't like snub them. No. Less of a priority, but something that's still important to do, is set aside a little time, at least weekly, to connect with your colleagues. It's super easy to just close your door and teach on your own, but that's also super isolating. And teaching, you will be so much more connected and rejuvenated and less likely to burn out if you connect with your colleagues. Ask them what's going well with their classes, compliment them, encourage them. By encouraging them, you're going to feel better about yourself as well. And it really builds everybody up. All right. So Felicity, number one tip of avoiding burnout in the early years of the career. Nope, I got to go with the top two. Have a support network. Know who's going to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself. The fact, just even if, hopefully you, by some miracle, end up not needing to call somebody and saying, I can't deal with this. I'm in crisis. Maybe you never need, knowing that you have somebody you can go to, just that knowledge, that security, so helpful. That's super helpful. And then setting and prioritizing that allows you to set and maintain your boundaries. I will I'm typing my email into chat. Feel free to send me questions if you think of something later at any point. If you want to say, here's how I think I'm going to prioritize things, you want to talk about that. How do you prioritize things? When you have different assignments for different classes, how do you structure your classes so that you're not grading everybody's essay at the same time? Those sorts of things, that are more specific and more situational. I absolutely feel free. But finding out how to prioritize so that you can get done things that you have to do during the school day allows you that breathing time to have a social life, to be, reconnected, but also to have time to rest. Very, very, very important. So yeah, not just one thing. It's got to be those top two. All right. Other questions, and then I just want to show you what the 5-day feedback form and procedure looks like, and that's going to be my last little bit. We'll wrap up. See, this is an example of wait time. Oh, I see a hand, Jenna. You got your hand up. Go for it.
So whenever you were talking earlier about like being in your classroom and not taking attendance before a fire drill, what happens in that case? Because I do ESP and like I'll always think about that and I'm like, dang, I don't have attendance done. And what if this happened and I lost a kid? Like I'd be in so much trouble. So like what do you do in that instance whenever
you apologize, you own it, absolutely own it. You should have a roster. Take the roster with you. And that way, because if you're lucky and you haven't logged attendance, if you're lucky, it's a day when everybody's there. And so you're just like, you check off, okay, everybody's here. Okay, I'm good. And then you don't tell anybody and you don't apologize for it. But if you go through and you're like, I have a kid who's not here. And I don't know if they like went to the restroom and didn't come back. I don't know if they just didn't show up. I don't know. Then like know what your school's procedure is for emergency drills like that. For us, we have zones and we'll have like a teacher we're supposed to report to and say, I have everybody. I have a student who was out of the restroom when, the fire drill began, whatever it is. Go up to that student and say, I'm missing one student, but that student may be absent. Also bonus, a lot of schools have digital platforms. And so it's almost never at the very beginning of the day or the very end of the day. If you can take your school iPad, laptop, whatever, and like anybody that you're missing, pull up their attendance from a previous class and see if they were there for that class. And if they've been marked if they've been marked absent in first block, second block, third block, and yours is fourth block, guess what? They ain't here today. So ultimately, if you go through what you can and you're just like, I don't know where this student is, just tell that like literally that's the point of fire drills. It's so that, you know what it feels like to lose a kid, because you're going to feel that. I'm going to tell my husband, he's a parapro and he does all kinds of things. A couple of years ago, he was working as a one-on-one parapro with a student with some disabilities, but he also helped out with some of the other students who had special needs. And he's in an elementary school. And so he was in the bathroom with a student who'd had an accident. And so they were getting things cleaned up and soothing the student, helping the student feel better. And the fire alarm went off. And he hadn't known that it was going to be a drill. And so he's standing there with the student and the student's pants are not on. So he's like, okay, we're going to do the best that we can. And that's all you can do. Do what you can and give yourself grace and try to have a good time, just like I say to my students. So yeah, if you talk to some of your colleagues about, okay, how are some ways that I can avoid having, what are some of the worst things that can happen and how can I avoid it? Because there's a lot of worse things that can happen. Losing a kid's one of them, but it's so much better to have it happen on a drill, So, and especially at the high school level, sometimes, I'll know that there's a fire drill and I'll often come in and say, I'm sorry, I really have to go to the bathroom. Please, can I go? I'll be like, okay, go. And I'll just plan to be like, I don't have a kid. They had to go to the bathroom. It was an emergency. It is what it is. So, is it Ayania? Okay. I apologize if I butchered your name. Question, how do you manage your time and not have to stay later daily? How do you get everything done? Answer, I don't. So I have a digital to-do list. I keep it a digital to-do list. And I don't order it by priority, but by time of here's when I think I'm going to have time to get this, this, and this done. But in my head, I know this is top priority. This is what I have to have. And so again, like I said, lesson planning, I got to know what I'm doing as much, because if I have that taken care of and I know how class is going to go, I don't have that like screaming in my brain at me, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do next block. If I have that feeling, it makes it so much more difficult to get anything else done. So that's one of the reasons why that's a priority for me. Also, just practically, if I can get the class going smoothly, I can at least begin thinking about, okay, I've been sitting on these essays for 2 weeks and I ain't looked at them yet. That's not good. I need to move that higher up on the priority list. But the truth is, I don't get it all done. And so whatever is in my list that I didn't get done, I just copy that sucker, paste it onto the next day, and then add in anything else that, I need to do. Again, in terms of, how long. And then I'll have a sense of how many times I have copy and pasted this particular task. And then that moves it higher up in my priorities. So yeah, I don't. Prioritizing means you are being honest with yourself. You're not going to get everything done in a day. Yeah. And some of it also is I have lessons. I don't go back and use the same lessons all over again. But what I do, I keep my lessons from the previous year. And as I'm approaching the end of this unit and about to go into the next unit, I pull the plans for the next unit. I pull the plans for the next unit and I look through them and decide what's going to work and what I think I need to tweak. And that gives me a little bit of time as I'm finishing up this unit, especially if the students are working on a project or something. That work time is time that I can sort of jot down ideas and things like that and be working on the final version of the plans for the next unit. And then as I'm going into the unit, I print off the new version. I go week by week. I put, this is what's going to happen this week. And then even if it's a unit that's longer than a week, which like if we're doing a novel study, it's going to take more than a week. But I print it a week at a time. And then as I'm going through on that day, this did not work. I need to give more time with this. Here we need a different, they need more practice with reviewing comma splices, whatever it is, just all kinds of notes in different color pens, I love my colored pens, and it makes it nice to go back and look at it. And so when I'm pulling last year's plans, I'm looking at something that's got writing all over it, which hopefully generally makes sense to me, because again, they're my notes. I did the lessons last year. I'm doing the lessons this year. So I'm looking at, okay. And sometimes, especially in that in-between time, a year later, I'm like, I read this story and this would be perfect. As I was going into one of the units that I love to do is on individuality versus community, like a sense of identity, and when is it appropriate to set aside what we want and go with the crowd? Because sometimes that's bad, but sometimes it's necessary. Like sometimes you shouldn't be selfish all the time, but at the same time, you need to assert those boundaries. And there, I found I use Sylvia Plath's Initiation and a story by Rona Maynard called The Fan Club, because they pair up really nicely. But then I found this additional story, again, about a student in high school, female student. So, protagonist, female student, high school, but it is a speculative fiction story by N.K. Jemisin. So the genre is like way different. And yes, beg, borrow, and steal, Dr. Myers. So I'm just, I see that. And then as I'm looking at last year's unit, I'm just like, oh yeah, there was that story. Do we have time to that? Am I going to have to scrap one of the other stories? Or do we have time? Can I move things around? So lesson plans I don't think lesson plans get easier. They stay hard, but they get hard in a different way, because the better you get with them, the more intricate and the more play you have. And there comes a time, you need to, again, it's again about boundaries. I will hit that a lot, because if you're just like I said, if you're going to add something new in, if you get this great new idea, if you just keep putting stuff in your great new ideas, you're not going to have time to do everything. So again, when something comes in, you have to say, okay, well, what am I not going to work on instead? That was one of my very first blog posts. The idea that I hear teachers say, well, I didn't have time to get to that. I'm like, no, you had time. You just did something else with your time. Like, own that. That's a choice. You know, when the time we spend teaching this is time we're not spending teaching anything else, to be honest. So be, you know, as much as possible, try to be not just conscientious, be deliberate about those choices. I'm very curious about your lesson plans, because everybody's lesson plans look different. Are you guys familiar with understanding by design, or the concept of backward design? That was something, I think that came out after I graduated from college, but that was something that really clicked with me. And so working backward from, you know, the standards that the students need to master, okay, how are we going to assess those? How are they going to prove that they know how to do this? And then based on, if I have an assessment that shows me whether or not they can do this thing, if I prepare the students for that assessment, then effectively I'm teaching them how to do this thing. So that was really helpful for me. And so instead of planning individual lessons, I tend to plan for a unit of study. Like, we are going to be learning about this, and it's generally content-based. So 9th and 10th grade for a long time have been genre studies. So we'll focus on poetry for this unit, but we'll pull in some fiction that uses, or some short nonfiction that uses a lot of figurative language and vivid language, so we can see how that plays out in other ways as supplemental materials. So I'm looking at the big picture overall, and how, you know, what I want to focus on for the big picture, and then how do I build into that unit by, or lesson by lesson. So it's unit as a whole, and then how do the lessons fit together? What are we looking at bit by bit? I'd be glad to share, Dr. Myers, I'll share some of my my unit plans from last year, I guess, since I actually do not have any for this semester. If you'd like to look at them, or if you want to share yours, I'd love to see them. Although I am certain that Dr. Myers shares lots of things with you as well. Other questions?
Yeah, we've been looking at lesson plans kind of based in Tennessee. It would be really great to see Georgia ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been looking at the core requirements for like Tennessee education and things like that. But lesson plans are all about, you know, like really the first time I ever taught, I taught somebody else's lesson plans because I didn't have any of my own yet. Mm-hmm. So like you develop, you'll have teachers help you, you'll have mentors and things like that. And I also, Dana, I'm going to put up your YouTube channel because there's a ton of videos there about grammar and learning how to teach literature, books. It's wonderful. It's such a really good resource to use as well. So, and then this is, you know, Dana is just one teacher among thousands that are eager to share and help and provide information. You know, like this is, we are very much a community of teachers, you know, where we share stuff. I recently was sharing our curriculum map with Dana, right? Yes. Like Dana's sharing her lesson plans with me. You know, we work together and we want to help people who are starting out get on their feet. The reason I was able to teach somebody else's syllabus my first year is because somebody gave me their entire, you know, like all of their readings and everything like that. So, you know, we don't, if you come across somebody who's mean, they're an outlier, right? Usually this is a community of people helping each other. Yeah. So lesson plans don't necessarily get easier. You just get a lot more resources to make them and to adapt them and to find them and to use other people's. So like, I will say my first semester, I was freaking out because I was seeing things I wanted to adjust. When I got sick this semester with my 1020s, I just used lesson plans from previous semesters because I couldn't rework mine for this semester. And it turned out okay. Uh-huh. You know, you figure this out as it goes. So the other thing is, if you're a teacher, like it's very exciting to come up with new ways and new subjects to teach. It's very exciting to think like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this differently. Oh my gosh, I'm going to present this differently. Sometimes something goes wrong and a lesson plan doesn't go the way you expected. And you're like, okay, how do I rework that? And that's where a lot of the joy comes from. Not just the students, not just helping students, but this idea of being able to change what you're doing. I've been teaching a trauma literature class for 2 years now. And next semester, I'm teaching completely different literature because I need a break from teaching trauma literature. And I have the capacity to do that, right? You can change up the readings you're doing. There's all sorts of ways to make this better. And just to get back to what Mrs. Cole was saying about, sorry, it's so weird. We've been friends for over a decade now. Like, it's just weird. Boundaries are important. And I will say I had very poor boundaries when I came into this position, teaching at the university level, teaching college students. And I would answer email on weekends and all night and everything like that. And I last semester, I started having very firm boundaries where I don't answer email after 8 p.m. and I don't answer email immediately. I have a notice in my syllabus that says I will get back to you within 48 hours, and I don't answer emails on weekends. And I don't grade on weekends anymore. I save my grading for Mondays and Fridays, right? I have lessened the amount of homework that I assigned. Instead, I do in-class participation to show me that you've done the readings or you've done you've participated in whatever we're doing that week. And then I can just do a check, like, did the person do this in class or not? So that becomes sort of a different way to handle things. If you're assigning too many things, stop. Assign less things. Make sure that your email doesn't go through to your phone after a certain amount of time. Do your grading while you're on the clock. Check your contract. All of these are fantastic ways to really put limits on this. Even and a lot of people will guilt you. Well, like, you do it for the students, and it's like, yeah, I do it for the students, and I have to pay rent. So make sure you have time.
My bank does not accept for the students in lieu of bills. That does, right. In lieu of a check.
Yeah. My landlord will not accept doing it for the students instead of my rent payment. So until he does, a lot of teachers do things on the side. There's really good ways to have second jobs and supplement your income. But with the teaching shortage, salaries are going to come up. They've got to. And you guys are not going to run into situations where you're going to be fired after your first semester because you have a lot of people backing you. And, you can come to me. Now Dana's given you information. You can come to her. You're building this support network of people who can help you with your teaching. And that is one of the most important things about this. So I did interrupt you. We are getting to the point where we need to wrap up, though. Does anybody have any final questions, thoughts, or we've got about 10 minutes. Dana, do you have more?
I have one quick thing. One of the other documents says it's the 5-day feedback form. And so this is probably, especially at the lower elementary levels, this is not going to be as helpful because students aren't really good with writing. But at the beginning of the term, when you don't know these new students, you also don't have a whole lot of grading to do. And so the 5-day feedback form was super helpful for me. It does take a lot of time to write back to every student every time. It takes a lot. But it's really important. It helps me get to know the students really quickly. And each one only takes a couple of minutes. So just, that becomes one of my top priorities. And also, especially since I've had, some pre-planning time that my first unit is generally my best one, and the one I feel most secure in. So I can take the time to do this. But what I wanted to show you is, so that's one side of the piece of paper. But I give students the form. And so this is just like coloring page because I didn't print one. I didn't think to print one out for myself or to bring one from school. So what I have students do is I take the paper and then fold it in half. I guess we call this hamburger style. So this way, okay, not skinny, but this way. And then, make that crease down the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then fold the ends in almost to the middle, but not quite. So giving about just like a 1/16 of an inch, just so that they're not folding over each other. And so that you can see that crease in the middle. So, and then really, I can kind of fold it over on itself. So ending up with something kind of like this. So really quick. So it looks like this. And then what I have them do is fold it. They can fold the two ends over each other like this. And then I have them sort of make like a little X here and here. And then I give them the big fat Crayola markers so that they can write their name on both of those sides. They can put it out. I tell them the middle is going to be the top. It's going to be the top of your name tent is what they're called. Or the person I got it from called it that. So your name goes here and your name goes here. And then they can put this on their desk and I'll be able, I just look and see who's who. And this is super helpful so that I can call students by the name that they want me to call them. And I don't have to remember it because I'm not going to be able to until at least a week goes by. And then the other nice thing is they keep this, they keep this for a week or for, however long I need them to. But they're also on the inside is where they're sharing their experiences with me, their thoughts and things like that. So the fact that it's folded up this way, it keeps it with them, but it also keeps it private. And then at the end of class, I have them write a note to me, respond to what I said previously, write me another quick note. It takes maybe a minute, hand it to me on their way out. And then before the next time I see them in class, I reply to them. And then I do my best to pass out these papers, be like, okay, so-and-so, or I'll just call them. I'll say so-and-so, and they come get it and they put it on their desk. So there are different ways of doing that. But that was something that I've done over the last couple of years that's been super, super helpful. Something I have not yet done that I'm anticipating trying out for the very first time next year is that I had pulled back, especially since the pandemic, on giving homework because students just weren't doing it. But my plan is, because we have the opportunity in our digital portal to give grades, and we can mark those grades as exempt. My plan is to assign homework maybe twice a week. It might just have to be once, grade it, but not have that grade affect their average. It'll go in the grade book so that students and their caregivers can see it as like a formative grade. Like, this is your practice work. Here's where you're at on your practice work. But if they just don't do it or they tank it, it's not going to hurt them. I'm really interested to see how that goes and whether I can maintain it, because it's going to mean more grading for me. So I'm really interested to see how that works, because I'm thinking it'll give the opportunity for practice and feedback, but without being punitive.
And this also reinforces one of the best teaching techniques that exists, which is have the student reflect on their learning. And this extends down to kindergarten.
Yeah.
In kindergarten, what did we do today? What did we learn today? Right? Throughout their career of learning, if you have them think about what they have learned, what they have done, what did they get out of this?
What are you doing differently now? Yeah. What are you doing differently that you did? What are you doing differently that you from the way you did things at the beginning of the unit or at the beginning of the term? I used to blank, but now I blank because.
And that is foundational for learning.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the PDFs that I have uploaded to our Zoom today are available on your class page as well. So you can take a look at those at your leisure. Does anybody have any last questions? We have about 4 minutes left. Last questions for Mrs. Cole. I'll give you time to type.
I just want to thank all of you so much for being here, for giving me the opportunity to share this with you. It is an exciting and kind of terrifying time to be a teacher. There's a lot of change going on right now, and that is it's scary, but at the same time, it's invigorating. You are needed more than ever. And and thanks, Dr. Myers, for inviting me as well. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. And I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were able to join us today. So next week starts our lesson plan presentations. Yeah. Yes, please thank Mrs. Cole.
And feel free to email me or message me, leave me a comment on a video. It won't show up right away because I have to approve all comments, so I'll see it. But yeah, stay in touch and good luck. Do what you can, be kind to yourself, and have a good time in your classroom.